Okay, guys, so today is going to be a little bit different. We are going to do the whole of Investigation 10 together, so make sure you have your math notebook, make sure you have your math book, and you've got something to write with before you start or continue with this video, okay? So today we're talking about compound probability. Now, we've talked about probability before, and we said probability is a number between 0 and 1. 0 means that event is not ever going to happen. 1 means that event definitely will happen. And usually probability is a fraction between 0 and 1. Okay? And remember, the top part of our fraction is the thing we want to happen, the event. The bottom part is the total number of outcomes that are possible. Okay? So in our books, on page 524, it talks about some different compound experiments. Okay? So number 1 says a spinner with 3 sections, A, B, and C, and then a marble drawn from a bag that has 4 blue marbles and 2 white marbles. So we have an event. The first event is the spinner being spun. The second event is picking a marble out of the bag. Okay? So it's a compound event, more than one event happening. Okay? The second example, a marble is drawn from the bag with 4 blue and 2 white marbles. Without putting the first marble back in, you choose another marble out of the bag. So 2 events. You go in and grab a marble out of the bag. You don't put that marble back in. You go in and grab another marble out of the bag. 2 draws from the bag. 2 events. That's a compound experiment. And the last one, a number cube rolled and then a coin flipped. We roll the die. We flip the coin. Okay? So these are all examples of compound probability events. Okay? So the first thing they talk about is a tree diagram. Okay? A tree diagram can help us find our sample space. Okay? Now, we've learned about sample space before, but let me remind you what sample space is. The sample space is a list of all the possible outcomes from the experiment. Okay? So they start with the first example. Number 1, the spinner with 3 sections, A, B, and C, and the bag of marbles that has blue marbles and white marbles in it. Okay? And then they create a tree diagram. It would probably be a good idea for you to get this in your notebooks, just for an example of a complete tree diagram. Okay? So in this example, here's our first event, spinning the spinner. Our second event is picking a marble out of the bag. Okay? Over here, we list our compound outcomes, also known as our sample space. Okay? So, let's see what's happening with this diagram. In this one, if we spin an A on our spinner, and then let's think about this. When I spin my spinner, what are my possible outcomes I could get? I could spin an A, I could spin a B, or I could spin a C. Okay? Those are 3 possible outcomes when I spin the spinner. But we have a compound probability event experiment. We're also going to draw a marble out of the bag. So if I spin an A on my spinner and then I go to draw a marble out of the bag, I could pick a blue marble, or I could pick a white marble. Okay? So over here I'm going to combine my spinning an A on the spinner with picking a blue marble, spinning an A on the spinner, and picking a white marble. Okay? If I spin a B on my spinner, I could pick a blue marble out of the bag, or I could pick a white marble out of the bag. If I spin a C out of the spinner, I could pick a blue marble out of the bag or a white marble out of the bag. So now I've combined my first event with each possible second event. A with a blue, A with a white. B with a blue, B with a white. C with a blue, C with a white. Okay? This is my sample space. Okay? So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 possible outcomes. Okay? I had 3 possible outcomes when I spin my spinner, 2 possible outcomes when I go to draw a marble out of the bag. I'm either going to pick a blue or I'm going to pick a white. So look at this bottom sentence. It's listed in your book on page 524. It's kind of in that paragraph that they give us at the bottom. To find the total number of possible outcomes, that's here, we multiply the possible outcomes of each part. Okay, so I had 3 possible outcomes on my spinner. That's 3 times 2 possible outcomes on the marbles. 3 times 2 is 6 possible outcomes. And looky here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I got 6 outcomes, possible outcomes. Okay? Now that's just talking about the sample space, though. That's talking about all of our possible outcomes. Now the probability of any one of these combinations happening is different than the sample space. Okay, so let's move to that. Let's move to the probability now. Okay, now at the top of page 525, this right here is written in a rectangle. Very, very important. Get this in your notes. The probability of an outcome is the product of the probabilities of each part of the outcome. Okay? The probability of the outcome is the product, that means we're going to multiply something, of the probabilities of each part. Okay, this will make more sense as we go. Now this is our experiment that we had a minute ago. I've got a spinner, sections A, B, and C on my spinner. Now this spinner is a little different because look at section A. Think about how much of the circle is taken up by section A and how much of the circle is taken up by section B and section C. Okay? And then it said I had 4 blue marbles and 2 white marbles in my bag. Okay? So we're going to spin the spinner and draw a marble out of the bag. Okay? Now, in your book, on page 525, it shows this little chart. Okay? We've already done the first one. Okay? I'm going to go over it. Or they've already done it. We're going to go over it. Okay? So we say on our first one, what's the probability that we get the first outcome that we talked about? The probability that I spin an A and that I get a blue marble when I pick it out of the bag. And we said we have to find the product of each part. Okay? So my probability of spinning an A, look at my spinner. Hopefully you see that the section A takes up half of the spinner. So the probability that I spin an A is half. 1/2. Times the probability that I pick a blue out of the bag. If I go in to pick a marble out of the bag, there's 4 marbles out of 6 total. 4 out of 6 is 2/3. So 1/2 times 2/3 gives me a probability of 1 out of 3. So the probability that I spin an A and grab a blue marble is 1 out of 3. Okay? So I have to take the probability of the first thing times the probability of the second thing. Okay? So now in your chart, we've already listed all the other outcomes from our sample space from our whiteboard before. So now let's think about the probability that I spin an A and then I draw out a white marble. Okay? Well, we already did the probability that I spin an A is 1/2, right? 1/2. Go ahead and draw this chart in your notes. And you need to be filling it out. Okay? So the probability that I spin an A is 1/2 times, now if I go to grab in my bag of marbles, the probability I grab a white is 2 out of 6, which is 1/3, right? 1/2 times 1/3, so the probability that I get A and a white is 1/6. Okay? I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'm going to have you do the rest on your own. Now the probability that I spin a blue, or I spin a B rather, and then I grab a blue marble. Okay, so look at my spinner. The B takes up 1/4 of the spinner. So the probability I spin a B is 1 out of 4 times the probability I grab a blue marble out of the bag is 4 out of 6, which is 2/3. So when I do this multiplication, I get 2 over 12, which is the same thing as 1 out of 6. Okay? Go ahead and find the probability for B, spinning a B and getting a white, spinning a C and getting a blue, spinning a C and getting a white. Find the next 3. Pause your video. When you get those next 3, start it back up again. Okay, probability of spinning a B is still 1/4. probability that I grab a white is 2 out of 6, which is 1/3. So the probability here is 1/12. C, the probability of spinning a C is 1/4. Probability of getting a blue, we've done that several times. 4 out of 6 is 2/3. 2 over 12 is 1/6. Spinning a C and grabbing a white marble. Spinning a C is 1/4 probability. Grabbing a white is 2 out of 6, which is 1 out of 3. So that's 1/12. Okay? So we have figured out the probabilities of getting any of these combinations. Okay? Now the last column, or the last row, says sum of all the possibilities. That means we need to add all the possibilities. Okay? So this is a third, a sixth, a sixth, a 12th, a sixth, and a 12th. If I'm going to add all these fractions, I need a common denominator, right? So let's make them all into 12ths. 1/3 is 4/12. 1/6 is 2/12. 1/6 is 2/12. 1/12 is 1/12. It's already a 12th, right? 1/6 is 2/12. 1/12 is 1/12. Let's add them all up. 1 and 2 makes 3. Another one makes 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 over 12 is equal to 1. So when we add up the probabilities of all of our outcomes, we should get 1. Okay? If you sum all of the possible probabilities, you should get 1. Okay? So we should have a 1 in there. Okay? Okay. Let's move on to our next item in our investigation. And the next thing is they want us to consider experiment 2 from page 524. And experiment 2 says we draw a marble from the bag. The bag has 4 blue marbles, 2 white marbles. Without replacing the first marble, we're going to grab a second marble. Okay? So 4 blue marbles, 2 white marbles. Our experiment is we're going to reach in, draw a marble out of the bag, not going to put it back, and then we're going to reach in and draw another marble out of the bag. Okay, so they have begun our tree diagram there. And the direction says for number 7, go ahead and complete the tree diagram. Okay, they started the tree diagram. Okay, they gave you the possible outcomes for the first draw from the bag. So you need to complete it for the second draw and then complete the total number of outcomes. So pause your video, see if you can complete the tree diagram and start it back up again. Okay, so in our first draw, when we go to grab a marble out of the bag, we could pick a blue, we could pick a white. When I go in to grab for my second draw, guess what we could pick? A blue or a white, right? So I'm going to combine my second draws with each of my first draws, okay? So they said if we draw a blue on the first draw, we could draw a blue on the second draw, or we could draw a white on the second draw, okay? If I draw a white on my first draw, I could draw a blue on my second draw, or a white on my second draw, okay? So the possible outcomes, they went ahead and did the first one, B, blue with a blue. So we need to continue that, and we need to say blue with a white. White with a blue, and then white with a white. Okay, so let's think about this. We said to find the total number of outcomes, we could multiply the possible outcomes of our first event times the possible outcomes of our second event. So when I go in to draw from the bag the first time, I could draw a blue or a white. That's 2 outcomes. When I go to draw from the bag the second time, I could draw a blue or a white. That's 2 outcomes. 2 times 2 is 4. I should have 4 outcomes, which I do. Okay? Now, number 8 says we're going to start completing our table. Okay? So let's think about this. In this experiment, when I draw my first marble out of the bag, I'm not putting that marble back in the bag before I draw the second marble out. Okay? So let's think about our first outcome, blue with a blue. Okay? I'm going to reach in and grab a marble out of the bag. Okay? What's the probability I can grab a blue? Well, 4 out of 6, which is 2/3, right? Now let's think about it. I'm saying that my first draw, I grabbed a blue. Now I'm not putting that marble back in, right? So how many blue marbles are in the bag now? 3. And how many are in there total? 5. So now when I go to make my second draw, I don't have 4 marbles out of 6 anymore. There's only 3 blues out of 5 total. So my second blue, the probability I grab it is only 3 out of 5. Okay? So my total probability here is 2 out of 5. Okay? Let me do one more with you. Okay, now when we go to our next outcome, we got to put our marble bag like it was. Okay? So our next outcome was blue with a white. Okay? So when I go to grab my first marble, I'm saying my first pick is a blue. The probability of that is 4 out of 6, which is 2 out of 3, right? Now when I go to make my second pick, there's 3 blues, 2 whites, and 5 total, right? So what's the probability that I grab a white? Well, it's 2 out of 5 total now, right? So the total probability there is 4 out of 15. Okay. Now our last 2 outcomes are white, then blue, white, then white. Okay. So I'm going to fix my marble bag. Every time you move on to your next outcome, you got to fix your marble bag back. Okay. So go ahead and try to figure out those last 2 probabilities. Okay. Think about it. After you make this first pick, you're not putting that marble back in. Okay. So go ahead and pause it and finish these last 2, and then see if you can sum your probabilities. Okay. On this next outcome, I'm saying I'm going to pick a white on my first draw. Well, there's 2 out of 6, which is 1/3. Okay. Now remember, I'm saying I've picked a white, and I'm not putting it back in. Okay. So now when I go to make my second draw, I'm going to want the probability that I draw out a blue. There's 4 blues out of 5 total marbles. So the combined probability here, when I multiply, is 4 out of 15. Okay? Now I need to put that white marble back up to start my last outcome. Now I'm saying I want to pick white on the first draw, white on the second draw, by the probability. So white on the first draw, 2 out of 6 is 1/3. Okay, I'm saying I picked a white on my first draw. So now when I go to pick my second draw, I want to know the probability that I get a white. 1 out of 5 total. 1 out of 5. So that gives me a probability of 1 out of 15. Okay? Now when you summed these, you had to get them all to 15s. These are all 15s except this one. 2/15 is the same thing as 6, or 2/5 rather, is the same thing as 6/15. 6/15 and let's see here. Did I do one of these wrong? 4/15. Okay, 6 and 4, that makes 10. 4, that makes 10/15. Plus another 4/15 is 14/15. Plus 1/15 is 15/15, which is the same thing as 1. So hopefully when you summed all your probabilities, you got to 1. Okay? Now number 9. Suppose we draw 3 marbles from this bag. Let me get my bag back to what it's supposed to be. 4 blues and 2 whites. Suppose we draw 3 marbles from the bag, one at a time, and we don't replace them. What's the probability of drawing 3 white marbles? What's the probability that I draw 3 white marbles? Go ahead and answer the first part, number 9 in your notebook. Hopefully you answered that the probability is 0. There's only 2 white marbles, so the probability that I can draw 3 white marbles out of the bag is 0. It's not going to happen. It's not possible. Okay? Now the last question on number 9 says, what's the probability of drawing 3 blue marbles? 3 blue marbles. Remember, I'm not replacing them. So let's see. The first time that I draw, I want blue with a blue with a blue, right? So in my first draw, there's 4 blues out of 6 total, which is 2/3, right? So I got to get rid of one of these now because I'm not replacing it. Now when I go to draw the second one, there's 3 blues out of 5 total. Okay, I'm not replacing that. Now when I go to draw for my third blue, there's 2 out of 4, which is 1/2. Okay? So let's reduce where I can. This reduces with this. This reduces with this. So the probability I get blue and a blue and a blue is 1 out of 5. Okay? So that's the second question on number 9. 1 out of 5. Okay, guys. We are almost done. We're going to do one more experiment. Okay? Now, the experiment they say to do now, at the top of page 527, consider a compound experiment in which a nickel is flipped and then a quarter is flipped. We're going to flip a nickel and then we're going to flip a quarter. Okay? So number 10 says to create a tree diagram that shows all the possible outcomes of the compound experiment. We're going to flip a nickel and then a quarter, and then you need to list the possible outcomes. Okay? So go ahead and pause your video and complete your tree diagram in your notebook. Okay, so when I think about flipping coins, I know that when I flip a coin, it will either land heads or it will land tails. Okay, so when I think about my nickel, the possible outcomes I could have, it could land on heads or it could land on tails. Okay. So if that's the result I get for my nickel, when I go to flip my quarter, what could I get? Heads or tails. So if I flip a heads on my nickel, I could flip heads or tails on my quarter. If I flip tails on my nickel, I could flip heads or tails on my quarter. Okay? So the possible outcomes are heads with a head, heads with a tail, tails with heads, or tails with tails. Okay, so these are my possible outcomes. Okay? Number 11 says to make a table that shows the probability of each of these possible outcomes. So now we're going to take those outcomes. I've gone ahead and listed them here. Now you need to find the probability that each of these things happens. Okay? So remember, it's the probability of the first thing times the probability of the second thing. Okay? Go ahead and pause your video and complete number 11, this chart. Okay, so when I'm looking at probability here, the probability that I flip a coin and get heads is 1/2. Probability that I flip a coin and get heads is 1/2. 1/2 times 1/2 is 1/4. Probability that I flip a coin and get heads is 1/2. Probability that I flip a coin and get tails is 1/2. So the probability I get heads, then tails, is 1/4. Probability I flip a coin and get tails is 1/2. Probability I flip a coin and get tails or heads is 1/2. So the probability that I get tails, then heads, is 1/4. You noticing a pattern here? Probability I flip a coin and get tails is 1/2. Probability I flip a coin and get tails is 1/2. The probability of getting tails and then tails is 1/4. Okay? Now, look at number 12. Number 12. What's the probability that one of the coins shows heads and the other shows tails? Probability that one of the coins shows heads and the other shows tails. Go ahead and answer that in your notebook. Well, the easiest way for me to see it is to look at my sample space. This one is heads. One of them shows heads and one of them shows heads, so that isn't it. This one shows heads and one shows tails. That's what we want. This one shows heads and one shows tails. That's what we want. On this one, they both show tails. So I have 2 outcomes that show what I want out of 4 total. So 2 out of 4 is 1/2. Number 12, you should have answered 1/2. Okay? Number 13, what is the probability that at least one of the coins shows heads? So look at your sample space and determine the probability at least one of the coins shows heads. Write it in your notebook for number 13. Well, I look at my sample space and see how many outcomes at least one of my coins shows heads. Here's one, here's one, here's one. Nope. So 1, 2, 3 out of 4 total. So 3 out of 4 is the probability that at least one of the coins shows heads. Okay? Okay, last question, number 14. What's the probability that the nickel shows heads and the quarter shows tails? The nickel is our first one. Quarter is the second one. So we want the outcome, how many outcomes, or the probability that the nickel is heads and the quarter is tails. So go ahead and answer number 14 in your notebook. Nickel is heads, quarter is tails. Well, I only see one outcome, where the nickel is heads and the quarter is tails. Nickel's first, then quarter, heads, then tails. So the probability there is 1 out of 4. Okay? Okay, guys, I know compound probability is a little bit confusing, okay? Hope you did well, and I hope you guys have a good day. No additional work on this lesson. It was just an investigation that we did together, okay? Sorry for the long video. Hope you guys have a great day. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.